don't forget to tell us when we're good to go.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
This was the third or fourth time in December that I was out walking in short sleeves. Something is going on because each of those times it's been 60 or above. And that's wonderful. But when warm air from the Gulf of Mexico, warm, moist air, surges north and hits cold air coming from Canada and the Arctic and starts to swirl around, it creates a weather phenomena found only in the United States. Almost every country in the world can experience a hurricane and earthquakes and all kinds of other things, but uniquely it's the United States tornadoes. Our hearts go out this evening to the people of Kentucky and Arkansas and other places that were devastated this week by the tornadoes. And you have probably seen the pictures of devastation, like a war zone from those tornadoes. So we can enjoy warm weather here, but recognize that when warm clashes with cold, dangerous, bad things can happen. But we turn to our celebration of Shabbat with our classic song of welcome for the Shabbat, Lecha Dodi, page 24. לקראת קהלה, פני שבת מקבלה. לקראת אותי, לקראת קהלה, פני שבת מקבלה. Page 20. שמר וזכור ודיבורך הדגיש מיד remain standing for our call to worship, the Baruch Hu, page 28. Please be seated. On page 31, praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim. From the world around us to the world within us, Ahavat Olam.
Shema
Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu,
Adonai Echad,
כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך
בכל לבבך
ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך.
והיו
הדברים האלה
אשר אנוכי
מצווך
היום
על לבבך ושיננתם לבניך
ודיברת
בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאורות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם
על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך
למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי
והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Next week, we begin the reading of the book of Exodus, the epic story of our liberation, but we reference the Exodus in the song that comes from that event, Mi Chamocha, page 40. כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגואלו מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל Yisrael. On page 42, grant, O God, that we lie down in peace and raise us up, our guardian, to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace.
השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים.
השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. ושמור צאתנו Baruch atah Adonai, hapores sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Page 44, the people of Israel shall keep Shabbat, observing Shabbat throughout the ages as a covenant for all time. לעשות את השבת לדורות ובברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורות ובברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורות וברית עולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורות וברית עולם וביום השביעי שבת וינפש שבת וינפש שבת וינפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורות וברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורות וברית עולם. Cantor, who wrote the melody to that rousing
Oh, this is Rothblum.
Rothblum? Do you know when it was written by any chance?
I will get back to you next week.
Because it's one of these melodies that you kind of wonder, is it like a traditional melody from centuries ago, or is it more contemporary? Because,
Oh, he's contemporary.
but it's contemporary, but it's been around for many, many decades. I grew up singing it as well, so that'll be many decades right there.
Still contemporary.
But, so this melody doesn't go all the way back to Mount Sinai, huh?
No, with the guitars and everything.
It is interesting how certain melodies just become really, really popular, and then sometimes they're attributed traditional or folk as going all the way back to Sinai, meaning all the way through the generations, but yet sometimes they're just a contemporary composer, modern composer, and it just became very widespread, accepted in a particular movement or across the Jewish community. So as we continue now into the Avot, who wrote that melody?
That's Nusach.
That's Nusach, which is a word meaning kind of traditional melody. So does it go back decades, centuries, or even longer? It's hard to know in many, many
Well, this
cases.
is, I think that they attribute that to Ezra HaSofer. So that goes way back.
Whether this melody can go as far back as Ezra, over 2,000 years, 2,500 years, I don't know. Parts of the prayers themselves, the Hebrew language goes back. Melodies, it's more difficult to trace. In any case, we're now ready for the tefillah. Page 46, we rise.
Adonai שפתי תפתח ופיה כי תהילתך. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, הבל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה הכל אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיה הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומדום מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה. ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
Please be seated. Days pass and the years vanish, and we walk sightless among miracles. God, fill our eyes with seeing and our minds with knowing. Let there be moments when your presence, like lightning, illumines the darkness in which we walk. Help us to see, wherever we gaze, that the bush burns unconsumed, and we, clay touched by God, will reach out for holiness and exclaim in wonder, how filled with awe is this place, and we did not know it. Page 59, God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha, ulecha na'eh lehodot. We end this section of prayer on the note of peace, Shalom Rav, page 60.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha, tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha, tasim le'olam. שלום רב לי סלמך, תשים לעולם, תשים לעולם,
Now, at the end of the Amidah, our thoughts turn to those of our loved ones in need of healing, be this a healing of body or a healing of soul. Of course, our prayers extend to all those in need of healing, those stricken by natural disasters and all sorts of plagues. We join with the Cantor in our healing prayer. We'll be talking more about Jacob's last days in a few moments. But now I want to note that before Jacob passes away at an exceedingly old age, he does gather all his big family around him. They come together, and Jacob offers a blessing to each and every one of his sons. I am disturbed about the fact that his one daughter is not mentioned and doesn't receive a blessing, Dina.
We'll fix that.
But each son receives words appropriate for what Jacob believes is their characteristics, their personality. And it's in poetic style, and it's meant to also be a comment upon the tribe that will stem from each son. But it is true that Jacob tries to find the words that are appropriate for each child. Some of them are strange, some of them are hard to understand, but the intent is there to recognize each person for who they are and to bring forth a blessing for that person. And so as we pause now, we think about how among our diverse family, we can approach each person and find the blessing, the positive and the blessing that is in that person, no matter how difficult they may be. We pause. That song, appropriately enough, was called Jacob's Blessing, an Iris Karlin original. Was that a world premiere?
Yeah.
Another world premiere.
His words, though, I just added Dina, to fit, as a tikkun.
With keeping Dina in mind as well. The ending of the book of Genesis is so powerful with the conclusion of the saga of Jacob and Joseph. And last week, we talked about that pivotal moment when Judah approaches Joseph and the emotional catharsis of reconciliation that occurs. And then the family follows, and old man Jacob is described making that journey down with his sons, and we have the grand reunion of the family and the reconciliation of the brothers, and it's happily ever after, right?
No.
Not quite. Not quite. I mean, there's certainly an element of celebration and the reconciliation, and although the circumstances of a famine and then now being in Egypt are difficult, the family at least is together. But what happens in this final chapter of Genesis? Read closely. What exactly happens? Basically, three things. And they're all interesting, and they're all a commentary on happily ever after, in a way. The first thing is that Jacob, sensing that his days are almost gone, almost over, he asks Joseph, the special son, to bring his two children forward, Ephraim and Manasseh. And then he does something very interesting without even asking Joseph. If you read carefully, he adopts them. He adopts them. And he actually says in the Torah portion, from now on, these will be mine, like sons, not grandchildren, like sons. Why does he do this? He comes on very strong for a man who's basically now on near his deathbed. And he's insistent on that. And then when he goes to bless his sons, who are actually his grandsons, he goes like this. And he blesses the younger first with his right hand and the older second with his left hand. And Joseph says, wait a second, Dad. You're supposed to do the older son first. And Jacob says, no, I know what I'm doing here. Repeating this pattern that the blessing goes according to what God wants, not according to birth order, the natural order. So Jacob does this unusual adoption and then this reversing of the order. And so the question is, why? I'll get back to that. Then secondly, Jacob 3 times makes it very clear, I have one last wish before I die. One last wish. I want to be buried in Canaan, in Israel. Do not bury me here. Do not leave my bones here. He repeats it. After the audience with Pharaoh and when he's sensing his end, this is what he wants, and repeats it multiple times. And in fact, we see the grand funeral procession. Joseph honors his father's wishes, not to be buried in any general place. He wants to be buried with his ancestors in the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. That's where his grandparents, Abraham and Sarah, and his parents, Isaac and Rebekah, and his wife Leah, not Rachel. Rachel dies suddenly and is buried on the road to Bethlehem. And he always regrets the fact that he could not bury her. Not that they're that far away, but for whatever reason, he doesn't. But the rest of the family, and that's where he wants to be, with his forefathers and with the rest of his family. And why is that? Well, let me suggest that the reconciliation of brothers and the reconciliation of even father and son is not as perfect and not as complete or full as you may think. Stop and think about it. Yes, Jacob is overjoyed that the son he thought who was dead is alive. I mean, that's an amazing thing. He went years thinking that that Joseph was dead. So that is amazing. But now that the reality has sunk in, this is my theory. I haven't read this someplace else. Who is Joseph, though? He's his son, but he's an Egyptian now. Right. He's the number 2. And he looks like an Egyptian, walks like an Egyptian, talks like an Egyptian. Absolutely. Who knows how much he even, he understood Hebrew, but can he still speak it after 20 years? He was just a young teen when all this happened, but he's married an Egyptian. And he's bringing up his kids, his 2 boys, as Egyptians. So I'm wondering, is this adoption a way of kind of wrestling with his son and saying, you're alive, that's wonderful, but you're Egyptian and I want my grandchildren to be Hebrews. So that's why I'm adopting them. And then when he repeatedly asked to be buried, well, that might be an emotional, sentimental thing. You can understand it. But I think old man Jacob is also trying to make a point to Joseph, assimilated Joseph, and so he knows that this sojourn in Egypt is not going to be a passing thing. He senses that they can't go back to Canaan, to Israel anytime soon. Maybe he has a foreboding. It seems like it in certain passages that it's going to be generations. Little does he know, according to the Torah, it will be 400 years before the Jews return. But when he's saying, bury me where I belong, bury me in the promised land, that's a message to his children and the next generation. Don't forget the promised land. Don't forget where your ancestors came from. Don't give up that dream. Don't give up that promise. And sure enough, at the very end of Genesis, what's the last thing that Genesis says? When Joseph dies, that Joseph charged his children what? Don't leave my bones here. At such time as you can, bring me back to be buried in the promised land. And Moses did that when the Exodus finally came. And the last thing, the last important point on this whole family dynamics is when Jacob dies and is buried and everybody comes back to Israel. And the fact that they could even do this just shows you Joseph's stature, that Pharaoh would let the whole people, the whole group go up and then come back. But then when they come back, listen to what Genesis says. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrong that we did him. Wow. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, before his death, your father left this instruction. So shall you say to Joseph, forgive, I urge you, the offense and guilt of your brothers who treated you so harshly. Did Jacob ever do that? There's no mention of it. Did the brothers make that up? Did they tell a little lie here? Maybe. But what's the point of this passage? They're feeling insecure. This reconciliation, when you've done something wrong and somebody forgives you, do they really forgive you? Do they forgive you forever? Do they forgive you 100%? Time has to pass, and you have to maybe prove yourself. So the brothers are insecure. The reconciliation of brothers and of father and son is not complete. To his credit, Joseph, first of all, he starts crying again. He's a very emotional man. He's cried at a number of times in his life, and Jacob also was a man who was not afraid to cry. But he says, I forgive you. God had a plan. He repeats what he said at the moment of reconciliation. Joseph was in tears as they spoke. Joseph said, have no fear. Am I a substitute for God? Although you intended me harm, God intended it for good, so as to bring about the present result, the survival of many people. So fear not. I will sustain you and your children. That's good. That's very good. But he's the sustainer. He has the power. And they will always know that. So, in conclusion, reconciliation, forgiveness, crucial in our lives, but it's rarely perfect. Often we have like ceasefires, not the end of conflict or the end of war entirely. But we have to recognize that reconciliation is a process. It takes time. It's never probably fully complete. Tensions and conflicts in family, I don't know if they ever go away completely. They remain at the surface or below the surface. And we have to understand that. That's what hinders total reconciliation. But finally, Genesis so powerfully expresses the fact that blessings and curses in our lives, they're intertwined. They're intertwined. And there's an expression in Hebrew, Gam ze yavor. This too shall pass. When we get too depressed about the conflicts and the bad stuff, remember that good will come. When we get too high about the good time or too complacent or become ingrates about it, remember that bad can often follow good, and then good will come again. It's intertwined together. Such is the life. Jacob recognized that, and that's what Genesis teaches us. Shabbat shalom. The Aleinu, the bottom of page 282. As we open the ark and are blinded by the light, please rise.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובהי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו, אין עוד. אמת מלכנו, אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו. וידעת היום, והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
On this Shabbat, I do want to mention that as a nation, we passed 800,000 deaths due to COVID this week. It's hard to think about that number, but I understand that at the National Cathedral this week, they rang their bells 800 times for each 1,000 people who passed away. Of course, we think about the loss of life in Kentucky and other areas this week as well, the terrible loss of life. And on this Shabbat, we call to mind in love and reverence the Yortzeit, the anniversary of the passing of Bernard Fine, father of Jay Fine, and Marilyn Fine, mother of Jay Fine. Irving Chalkin, father of Dennis Chalkin. Irving Sachs, husband of Kate Sachs. And Paul Heyman, father of Joan Rosen. For all those close to our hearts and for all those for whom there may be no one to say Kaddish, we join in the Kaddish prayer on page 294. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba be'alama divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'hayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael ba'agala uv'zman kari v'imru Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach leolam olamei almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei d'kudisha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehi shtama Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. Amen. Please be seated. Thank you, Michael, for the live stream this evening. Michael and Lauren faithfully live stream all of our Shabbat services. Talking about wild and crazy stories in the Bible, The story of Samson is just that. And that's what we're reading tomorrow in our study on the rise and fall of ancient Israel. We're in the book of Judges, and the big story, the premier story, 3 chapters long, is this most unconventional of Jewish heroes named Samson. Religious school will be meeting at 9 o'clock this Sunday, but keep in mind that next week and the week after, which happen to be Christmas Day and New Year's Day, there will not be Torah study for 2 weeks. Religious school will also be off after this Sunday for the next 2 weeks corresponding to winter break. But you ask, well, what about the service? Will there be a service on Christmas Eve? Will there be a service on New Year's Eve? The answer is Shabbat is Shabbat. Yes, there will be. However, we have been doing a Zoom service about once a month. So next Shabbat, it'll be in the weekly announcement. Our Christmas Eve service, Shabbat evening service, will be via Zoom. And for New Year's Eve, it will be a live stream service. So live stream only. Live stream only. This will be, as I said, in the weekly announcements as we come to the last 2 weeks of the civil year. With that, we'll conclude this Shabbat service with a classic Shabbat song, Adon Olam, on page 321.
Not a Misinai melody. This is the melody of Uzi Chitman, one of the greatest composers of Israeli folk.
Shabbat Shalom.